Hello, everybody. I'm Jerry Hayes, Vice President of Research and Development, as advertised. Okay, so everyone can hear me, right? If anyone can't hear me, raise their hand. Okay, great. All right, before I start, I just want to say that people can start sending in questions for the user roundtable session right now if you want to get your questions in early. So we'll be ready to do that. We've got a lot to go through here, so yeah, please keep all applause till the end. Okay, enough about me. Let's talk about you and all the things that we're doing for you. So here in research and development, we do the annual data updates. We're making lots of software enhancements to try to make sure the model looks modern, that we're making good use of tools available. We're constantly re-estimating model equations and the coefficients. This year, we've been sending out a couple of RSQE forecast updates due to the COVID situation, and we've also been coming up with some new solutions for modeling a changing world, both in new features and in new product IQ Plus, which we will talk about a little bit later. Okay, so first thing I want to do here is I want to go through and review some of the things that we've done last year. And the reason I like to do this is because when I show up at the conferences and I say, hey, have people seen this? And they haven't seen this. So that's what we got to do. First, we're going to talk a little bit about the major data changes in last year's model. And so the BLS releases its employment projections every other year. And this was a year where they have released those projections, which include the new input-output table, employment values, output values, value-added, labor productivity, and deflators. Do I not have full screen here? Hang on. What are we looking at here, Chris? Do I not have the full screen showing?
I'm looking at the presenter's view. Monitor icon button should allow you to change which screen you're sharing.
All right. So are we seeing the? Do you see the notes on here, or do you just see the presentation?
Yes, I'm seeing the notes.
Oh, we got the wrong screen. Okay. How does this look? Better?
Perfect. Thank you, Joe.
All right. Moving on. Okay. So major things that we need to know is that the employment, so we have the new employment projections in there, which has a whole bunch of different components that affect our forecast. We also have the BEA's comprehensive updates to the local personal income data. According to the BEA, they incorporated revised source data that's more complete and more detailed than previously available. And that information goes back throughout our model history. And the other interesting thing is that the BEA expanded its GDP data by county. So previously, we had 3 categories last year, and that's been expanded to 21 categories. And the time series for that has changed from 4 years to our entire history. So when people wonder why their model looks a little bit different this year than it did last year, these are the reasons for that. Okay, and I wanted to mention as well that due to the rapidly changing economy, the fine people at RSQE have put out a couple more forecasts than usual, and we have made macroeconomic updates available through the website so that people can adjust their national forecast accordingly. Everyone should know about this, but if you don't, it's on the website, and if you can't find it there, one of our fine REMI staff can point you towards it. So this is a point where I'd like to go through and show off a couple of our new features that we put into the model over this past year. Okay, so what I'm going to start with is I'm going to go to the model details and show you a couple little things in here that we did to make your lives easier. We'll start by taking a look at the IO matrix. And one thing that we did is we added history to this. Previously, this was a large grid that wasn't very colorful. We've added some color to it to separate the different sections. And we've added some tools to help you navigate between the sections more quickly. So you can jump to certain areas if you want. We put some filtering in here, which you can also do by using this right-click feature. So if you wanted to, you could turn off everything and maybe compare two consumption categories side by side. We've also made it so that you can actually look at a little bar chart that shows you the difference between those two things. And we've even gone and put some little comments in here to help people understand how IO tables work. All right. The other thing that we've done on this area is that we've added lists of occupations, industries, and commodities. So previously this was in the model documentation, and there are several sheets that showed each of these in different ways. We've integrated this into the interface so that you can see it however you like. You can look at it as a flat list or as a hierarchical list. You can see some details that aren't in your current model. So these correspond to the 23, 70, and 160 sector models. And then the detail will show you the translators that we have. And so we'll scroll down here a little bit, and you can see that this year we've added in state and local government translators, which people have been asking for. People asked about this at last year's users conference. So that's another reason why you should put in your questions and comments in for the user roundtable, because we do listen. The other thing that's interesting about this is we have a search on here. And so if you're looking to figure out where something fits in, like veterinary services, you can see that that's part of other professional, scientific, and technical services, that sort of thing. You can rearrange these a little bit however you like. You can save it to a PDF in Excel, that sort of thing. Same thing with occupations and commodities, but we're not going to go through that. And the other sort of interesting thing here is that if you look at the policy variable list or the results list, we also put a filter on there as well. But in this case, if you do a search, it's going to filter the list instead of jumping you on the list like the other one did. All right. So one of the big things that we added was some studies features. And I already did some studies here just to quickly show people what it looks like. I could spend a lot of time talking about these, but I want to make sure that people are just aware of them. So one thing I did real quickly here is we have a multiplier study where you can put in some policy variables for certain industries in certain regions, and it will create a bunch of forecasts needed to calculate multipliers, and then the results will show up in here and you can see those. The other thing we have is a forecast ranking study, which I could go into even more detail about, but the idea is that you could make multiple simulations with different policy variables. You could run all those forecasts. And then when you're done, you could rank them with different types of scores according to however you want to see them. In this case, I have a result here that an employment result where there are many different types of details for how you would award points. But you could take these economic scores and put together an overall score, or you could put some other attributes, which I just randomly made up some things like a shovel-ready attribute where I assign 10 extra points if it's shovel-ready, that sort of thing. So that's in there. I just want people to know about that. The other thing that we did here, we also, in the same way that we're able to run many simulations to do those studies, we also have something in here where people can also run a bunch of simulations on their own. If you wanted to make 50 different simulations and hit the run button once, it would go through all of those, but we're not going to go through all those right now. And I'm just going to hide all the study simulations here for a moment. The other thing I want to show you is that we did do a little bit of work on custom aggregations where we made an option so that you can have flexible aggregations or strict aggregations. So before, everything had to be mapped to exactly one group. Now we have an option where you can map things to multiple groups. So for an example here, I made a population example where we have the same ages appearing in different areas. We also did a little bit of work on the custom results here. So let's open up this one I've already made, where you can actually use the IO table to fill in these values if you want to use either inputs or outputs from the IO table, and then you use a particular industry or a combination of industries. And then later, the other thing that we did is we made it so that you can then use custom results to spread policy variable inputs if you want to. Okay. Another big thing that we did was we spent some time making it a little bit easier for people to understand how to do the macroeconomic updates, employment updates, and population updates. I'm going to go through the macroeconomic update for a moment here. I'm not going to do the other two, but the same sort of things we did with them. We changed around the interface a little bit, so we have a little bit more instruction about how to use it. We have an options tab that explains the different types of things that you may want to turn on and off. And sort of the big thing here is that we put this option on here about whether or not when you do your update, if you want to hit target values or match growth rates. We didn't actually change how things work, but we put this option on here to prevent people from making mistakes that we frequently found that people were making. Then on the next tab, you can enter the values. We put something in here that will allow you to fill in values from the baseline if you want to, or adjust it from the baseline, and then it'll fill those values in for you. Then you can go to the final one, and you can confirm that it has those changes that you put in there. I just threw in those ones and save that and continue. So we're really working to try to make it a little bit easier for people to see how to use it and just give them a little bit of guidance there. The other thing that you should know is that now when you make a new national control, it's automatically going to create a default regional control for that national control. Previously, you wouldn't get a control under here. So this is equivalent to the standard regional control that appears under the standard national control. And then now when you make an alternative control, which I made here, this will be built off of that. If you do a percent change from baseline, that's the baseline it's doing a percent change from. Okay. Now I'm going to take a look. This is the part that I enjoy here. We're going to look at the results for a second, and we've done a bunch of work here to make this easier to use. And I can tell you that it's a good feature because every time I use an older model, I get irritated that it doesn't have these features. So what we've done is we've added drag and drop pivoting. So how many people noticed that? Not many, huh? Okay. So here's what we did. We made it so you can drag these around to pivot them, which is a little bit easier than using the existing tools. It's a little bit more intuitive. You know, it's what you actually want to do. So you can do something like this, can move them around. We've added this right-click feature so that you can, if you want, remove that total. We can remove that total from there. We could look at it this way. We can take the ages. And remember, I made the flexible example. Well, here it is. And if you don't really believe me that it has the same ones multiple times, we can switch it to this hierarchical mode, and you can see that it's got 0 to 10 and 0 to 25. That was another client request, so I promise you we do listen. The other thing we've done here is we've also made it so that when you switch visualization types, we've added the first thing on there is a current pivot. So if you already have it pivoted the way you want it, you can click on that and put that pivot on there. Also, if you have the table on here, you can still do some pivoting like that and adjust it. And now you're saying, Jerry, what are you doing here? That's not useful. That's not what we want to look at all. You're just randomly clicking things. Well, we also put a reload button on there so we can return it back to its original state. Okay. The other thing I want to show you is that we did a bunch of work. Let's see. With the documentation here. So if we go onto the documentation, so we reordered this so that you can more easily find what you're looking for, or you can look at the list of all of the different things. And in addition to that, because people don't always know what's new, we put this big shiny new tile on here that says what's new. And so what we did here, instead of trying to have lots of text, we focused on making some nice pictures and animations that show the different types of things that we've done here. So you can see some other things that I haven't mentioned. We threw a cancel button there. You know, we put this little control here to make it, if you're one of the people who likes to type things in there, you can do that instead of grabbing the scroll bars. We made it so that you can drag and drop to move policy variables around in the policy variable list. And the other interesting thing is we made it so that for all the people who are copying values from Excel and pasting them into the policy variable tab, if you have formatting like $signs, things like that, you can now paste it and it will ignore all of that formatting and just paste the actual values in there. So we added delete buttons, we added, you know, check right-click options, things like that. And the other thing I wanted to mention to people is that we also put something in there so that if you run a policy variable and that policy variable has no effect, that we let you know about that, because sometimes people will do something where they say, I want to increase the employment in museums in this area by 10%. And the baseline is 0. And then the policy variable is going to have an effect of 0, but we don't want you to go back to your bosses and say, like, this is the result of changing museum employment by 10%. if nothing actually happened. We also did some things where we allowed filtering for origin and destination regions, which we didn't have before. And we also added a way that you can filter the paths in the Connection Explorer to more easily go through and do that sort of thing. So we've got a couple more things there. I don't want to spend too much more time on that, because what I want to do is I want to show you a little bit of what we've done here in TaxPI, because TaxPI, we went through and we did a major revision, because over the years we've been adding lots of new features, and we've had more features that we've wanted to add, but it's a little bit difficult to fit all those in there. And so we redesigned it and gave a little bit more guidance. And so now we have some things in here that help people understand what the fiscal year and the units do. We've made it so people who have multi-region TaxPI models, they can choose to put values in either by individual areas or for combinations of areas. We've made it so, let's see, I've got an example in here. So this is one that can be, you can put values in for multiple regions. You can put it in that way, or you can put it in this way. It's a little bit of a pivot there. But also we've added a lot more information about how it is that you calibrate each of these budget items. So, you know, we have a separate tab for the indicator, give you some more room to put that information in and some information about it. The other thing that we've done we had clients requesting this, is that we've made it so that instead of effective rates being calculated from the last year, that you can have some control over how many years are used. So in this case, I put a 25 there, but we could easily treat all the years the same, or only use the most recent year, or put something else in there, whatever we want. We've also added a feature for putting in fixed amounts, so that the effective rate will only use the marginal change. So you can put in a fixed amount, and you can put fixed amounts in for future years. So that's all new. And we also made it so that a budget item can be inversely have an inverse relationship with the driver, or you can, you know, change what the relationship is, so that if perhaps your the driver doubles, that maybe you only want the budget to increase by 50%. And then we added something here, which I like. This gives you a projection for that budget item based off of the control forecast. And then we even put a little spreadsheet tool in here so that you can look to see what the calculations were and see exactly how the different things were calculated, so you can better understand what's going on. Similar sort of thing, policy variables just give you a little bit more information in there about how that works. And then we've also made it so it can generate sort of a baseline forecast without any kind of feedbacks, but just to show you what it would look like with all your current settings. Okay, so I think, hang on, let's get back over here. Oh, the other thing that we should mention is that also we did make it so that all of the different settings, it is possible for you to export those to a single file for sharing with coworkers, or sending to REMI, or whatever you like. Okay, so that's what we have done. Now let's take a moment here to talk about what it is that we plan to do. So for next year's model, we're going to add another year of history. And remember what I told you about the BLS releasing employment projections every 2 years? Well, apparently they decided to release it annually now, or at the very least they've they've released it 2 years in a row. I don't know exactly what they intend to do in the future. Initially, what they're telling us is that these projections do not include COVID-19 pandemic, the response and the impacts, but they may be sending out some sort of revision later. So stay tuned for that. The other thing that we're working on, as I mentioned before, re-estimating parameters for model equations. And so we have been working on re-estimating the consumption equation parameters. And for more information about that, we have a presentation from Xiaochu Ma. Xiaochu, are you out there?
Yeah. Can I share my screen? Okay.
Okay. I can see you and I can see your screen.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Jerry. Hello, everyone. I'm Xiaochu, economic analyst at REMI. So today I will show you how REMI estimates the parameters in consumption equation. So before we take a look at the consumption equation, there is one question that needs to be answered. Why is consumption equation important? Why we use it as an example here? I listed 3 reasons here. So first, according to World Bank data in the US, final consumption expenditure accounts for 82.3% of the GDP in 2018. So consumption is a very big component of GDP. Second, people's consumption behavior is an important factor of consideration for government policy making, such as tax policies. For example, some governments may want to raise the cigarette tax because that's very good for public health. But that may also change people's consumption behavior. Some people may turn to black markets for cheaper cigarettes. So that will result in a revenue outflow from the government and legal market to the black market. Third, consumption is also very important for economic forecasting because it links to a lot of very important economic variables such as output and employment. So now let's take a look at the equation and then go to the estimation parts. So as we can see, the consumption equation is very long. It has 7 terms. The main term here is term 6, which is the national level consumption per capita on commodity J. If other economic conditions in different regions are all the same, the only thing matter to the total consumption on commodity J in region K is the local population, which is term 7. However, in reality, different regions have very different economic conditions, so we need other terms to calibrate it. For example, if the commodity J, if its price increases, then people may want to consume fewer of commodity J. So that's captured in term 5, which is marginal price effect. Similarly, there is a marginal income effect, which means if people in region K earns more money, they may want to consume more high-quality goods. Also, in different regions, people have different consumption patterns. For example, people in Northeast spend more than national average on renting apartments. However, people in Midwest spend less than the national average on the same category. So that's called regional effect, which is captured by term 3. And there is also term 2, age effect. That's because in different regions, the population has very different age structure. And people in different age groups have very different consumption patterns. For example, younger people may spend more money on the new motor vehicles. However, people more than 75 years old, they will spend less on new motor vehicles. So that's the age effect. There is also another calibration effect, which is term 1. It captures the average total level of people's income in region K. So in this equation, we need to estimate term 2, age effect, term 3, regional effect, beta, which is income elasticity from term 4, and gamma, which is price elasticity from term 5. For other economic variables, we have the data which we can put into the equation directly, so we don't need to estimate other economic variables. And the data used for this estimation is from 1990 to 2018, and the data for last estimation is from 1990 to 2012. So now let's estimate the elasticities first. Here we use the data from BEA national income and product accounts. And the estimation methodology is OLS regression. In REMI's model, we have 75 commodities. So first, we need to run 75 regressions for each commodity to get its income elasticity and price elasticity. And after that, we can classify those 75 commodities into 2 groups, luxuries and necessities, according to their income elasticities. So now we have 2 pools of commodities, luxuries and necessities. And now we can run the regressions again just for the 2 groups, luxuries and necessities, and we can get the income and price elasticities for them. The final step is to normalize those elasticities based on the following equations. The normalization is because we want to give the proper proportion to luxuries and necessities about the changes of income and price. So we need to normalize them. After that, we can get the final results, and we can also see the difference between these versions of results and last versions. We can see for the income elasticity beta and price elasticity gamma, the values didn't change a lot. But there are 6 out of 75 commodities have changed their classification of luxuries or necessities. That's mainly because of people's consumption behavior changes and the productivity changes in related industries. So now we go to the age effect estimation part. As I have mentioned, the propensity to consume certain commodities differs largely by age group. So REMI used the data from BLS consumer expenditure survey tables and census population estimates to capture the age effect. So now we need to calculate the PC, which is propensity to consume, and percentage DG, which is the proportion of population of different age groups. Let's see the propensity to consume first. For example, PCLJ means the propensity to consume by age group L on commodity J. That's very easy to calculate. Just divide the average consumption by age group L on commodity J by the average consumption by all age groups on commodity J. In second step, we used the census data and divided the whole population into 8 age cohorts for the 4 census regions. And now we have all the values for percentage DG and PC, so we can just put them into this equation and get the final result. The last part is about the regional effect estimation, which captures the different consumption patterns for the families in different regions. The data is also from the BLS consumer expenditure survey tables, And here we have two parts to estimate. The denominators, which we have estimated in the last part, and the numerators. The numerator is just a relative consumption. That's the regional average consumption on commodity J divided by the national average consumption on commodity J. The reason why we need to divide this by the age effect is because in this relative consumption, it has already contained the information about age structure of the local population. So we need to divide the age effect to avoid double counting the age effect in the whole consumption equation. So that's all about my part. I will turn the floor over to Jerry. Thank you.
All right. Do I have the right screen this time? So,
it works, Jerry.
all right. Thank you very much, Xiaochu.
Thank you.
All right. So, take a moment here to talk about direct, indirect, and induced effects, because a lot of people ask us about indirect, direct, and induced effects, because this is the language that a lot of people use to communicate about economic impacts. And our model doesn't neatly fit with this because we're not an IO model, and that we have all kinds of dynamic results and forecasting capabilities. But we are working on trying to do some of that a little bit better, a little bit nicer. And so we're going to implement this into the next version. And so I think the important thing for people is that you should make sure that you read the definitions pretty well and that we all understand what we mean for each of the different things that we're showing. But we have a presentation now by Haozheyi Guan, and she is going to tell us a little bit more about how we're going to calculate these direct, indirect, and induced effects. Okay, we can see your slides, so you're good to go.
Okay, hi everyone. This is Haozheyi Guan. I'm the economic analyst at REMI. I'm very glad to be here to talk about how to calculate multipliers. There are many 4 parts in my presentation. I introduce the concepts first and then do a sample simulation and comparison analysis. Lastly, I will show a policy variable list. Before I introduce the concepts, let's think about a simple question. Suppose there is a $1 increase in local firm sales, then how can $1 of revenue support more than $1 of output in the local economy? So to answer this question, we can break down the total economic impacts into direct, indirect, and induced effects. Each component captures a different portion of the total economic impacts, and the sum of the 3 effects can be greater than the initial inputs. To better understand the economic impacts of shocks such as employment shock and output shocks, it is crucial for us to have a base knowledge of what the direct, indirect, and induced effects demonstrate. So the direct effects are the immediate effects of changes in economic activities. And the indirect effects are the changes in business-to-business activities that are not included in direct effects. They are caused by industry interactions through the supply chain. And induced effects include the economic impacts of household spending and other dynamic responses, such as government expenditure, prices, and labor supply. To further explain three types of effects, several simulations were run in REMI Massachusetts County's PI Plus model. The state of Massachusetts was chosen because it is a large and relatively diverse economy. In the sample simulation, an increase of 100 million in food manufacturing industry sales in Middlesex County was added as an exogenous output shock in year 2020, and we can calculate the output and employment multiplier. So the first step is to calculate the direct output. In this case, it equals to 100 million sales increase. To calculate the indirect output, two variables are used, which are values in national I/O matrix and regional purchase coefficient. The I/O coefficient captures the immediate uses of inputs. For each dollar of output produced by food manufacturing industry, the amount spent on supplier industry is provided in I/O matrix. So if we use I/O coefficient per industry times the regional purchase coefficient per industry and sum up across all industries, then we will have the indirect output coefficient. The total indirect output could be calculated by further multiplying the direct output. And the induced output is the rest part of the total output. Similarly, we can also calculate the employment effects. We can add labor productivity to the first two steps, and the output effects can be easily transformed to employment effects. The chart on the left shows that the 100 million sales shock can produce 100 million direct output and 352 direct jobs. And food manufacturing businesses will create additional activities that further increase spending at other local businesses, such as retail and wholesale industry that supply products and services to food manufacturing industry. In this case, the 100 million sales shock will create additional 19 million output and 80 jobs that are supported by business-to-business purchases. Increased revenues may subsequently increase payroll expenditures, so employees in food manufacturing industry can spend their income in the local region for housing, groceries, healthcare, etc., which can further increase the total value that all industries produce. So household spending can help further create 25 million output and 159 more jobs. Yeah, so this is a good example to explain why $1 input can produce more than $1 output. After we calculate the multiplier effects, we can continue to calculate the ratio multipliers. The type 1 and type 2 multipliers both measure how a total impact responds to the corresponding direct impact, but they are different in their definitions of total impacts in the numerator. For type 1 multiplier, we add indirect effects to direct effects. For type 2 multiplier, we sum up direct, indirect, and induced effects in the numerator. The chart above shows the type 1 and type 2 employment and output multiplier by year. And we can see the curves for type 1 multiplier are relatively flat. However, the curves for type 2 multipliers has some up and downs because we include induced effects in type 2 multiplier, which account for consumer and government behaviors. So these factors can be more volatile. Then we can move on to comparison analysis part. So here is the map for Massachusetts state. We use Franklin County to represent rural area, and we use Middlesex County to represent urban area. And we increased $100 million in food manufacturing industry sales in both regions. So the chart shows output multipliers by region, and it illustrates that the output multipliers tend to increase from rural area to urban area among these 3 years. So it may be because that businesses tend to be more closely related in urban area. So with more factories and equipment for urban area, regional demand for goods or services can be fulfilled more easily by regional production as opposed to being fulfilled by imports from other regions. So in this case, urban area has more business-to-business activities through the supply chain, which can generate higher spillover effects. Also, different consumer purchase behaviors among different regions can help explain. So increased revenues in food manufacturing industry may subsequently increase payroll. So urban citizens tend to have higher income and higher purchasing power, so they will purchase more goods and services from other local suppliers. And the household spending can help local businesses to further increase output. The next graph shows employment multipliers by sector, and the results depend on characteristics of different industries. And we mainly chose information services sector and construction sector, and there are 100 million sales shocks to each sector. The result shows that employment multipliers tend to be stronger in services than in a construction sector, because services industry tend to have wider impacts on the entire job market. Construction industry, however, may have relatively low indirect job creation. And information service companies tend to offer more competitive rate that employees can use to consume more in other businesses. And here is the list of the policy variables that we can use to calculate multipliers. They mainly include the employment and output policy variables. After we select the policy variables and run simulation, the multiplier effects will show automatically as a part of our results. So to wrap up, we mainly talk about the direct, indirect, and the induced effects. They are very important and fascinating. With REMI multipliers, we can choose multiple policy variables to do various economic research and analysis across different regions and sectors. So we are really looking forward to adding new multiplier calculations into our model. Yeah, so this is the end of my part. Thank you so much for listening, and let me hand it over to Jerry.
All right, thank you, Haozheyi.
Thank you.
All right, am I showing my slideshow again properly?
Yes.
Let's assume I am. Okay. Also, before we leave here, I want to mention one other thing, is that demographic impacts of job changes. So COVID-19 obviously has been having a huge effect on the economy, but the effect that it's had has been very disproportionately affecting different demographic cohorts. So I was looking over at the BLS website, and I was looking at the monthly employment numbers and labor force numbers. And the employment losses by women since the beginning of the year through September have been 618,000 higher than men. And 761,000 more women have dropped out of the labor force in that period of time. So one of the things that we are working on is we're trying to use some of this IPUMS survey data, which has employment by occupation, gender, and race. And we're looking to see, we want to incorporate this into the model to help show the demographic impacts of different types of job changes for, COVID and other causes of job loss. So put together a quick little chart here. And so on these, the male is here in blue. And so you can see that men make up more than half of the employment or at the beginning of the year, but the employment losses by men are less than half of the losses. And similarly with the labor force, men make up more than half the labor force, but are not making up nearly half of the labor force losses. So we're going to work on implementing that. The other thing that we've been working on over the past few months has been this IQ Plus model for quarterly analysis. I know you've heard some about this yesterday, so I'm not going to go too much into that, but we've been working on making software changes and equate modifications to the model equations to make this work, because things are rapidly changing, and people are concerned about the next quarter and the quarter after that, and it's just like it just seems like we're all living quarter to quarter now, trying to figure out when things are going to go back to normal and when vaccines are going to come out, and we're no longer sort of just worrying about annual impacts. So for this next version, we're still planning on adding new helpful features, making the user interface friendlier, and we're trying to keep up to date on all that sort of thing. So we have various changes that we're going to implement. We've made other changes, like we have some of the tax policy variables that people have been wondering why they can't put those in for aggregate regions. We've taken care of that. We're going to add some more features for the results. We're going to put some new tables in there in certain products to try to help people understand the results a little bit better. We're going to add other features to help out, so you can show more things in the data visualizations, and lots of little things like improving right-click menus and adding more options here and there. So we are dedicated to making keep improving the model. We've got a growing team here. We're trying to make the best use of the data available, and we're using a lot of resources to try to make this better. And we love to hear your feedback, things that you like, things that you don't like, things that you'd like to see in there. We want to hear from you, because REMI has the best users out there. Like, we've got all the best people. So nice to see all of you, and we are going to transition here into the user roundtable session, because